Sorry, I'm back.
I'm sorry too.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here. It is Flaming Lips Week. As voted on by the patrons, they won the Patreon poll. Weird discography, all kinds of weird releases, compilations, cover albums. We tried to simplify it as much as possible. We're going with what feels like the core studio records. 16 is our count. Basically all the ones you would expect, plus Zyrika. Not doing the covers albums or the Heady Fwens stuff. 16 records, so we're going to do groups of 3, get through some of the weaker records, and then talk about our top 10s one at a time. Who shall kick it off? Cram went first last time, so shall I go first? Bottom for me should be no surprise to anyone. I don't think it's The Terror. They add additional guitarist, keyboardist Derek Brown, and that's absolutely the only notable thing about this record. It's total nonsense. The press release for the record said basically the idea of it is that like they've once thought that all you needed was love, and now they've realized that love means nothing, and that even without love, the world just keeps going on and on. So it's meant to be bleak and hopeless, and I get that, and I don't doubt that they achieved what they were going for with this record, but it is just unlistenable to me. It's just droning on and on. No tunes, nothing interesting ever happens. So boring, puts me to sleep instantly, and I have no desire to ever hear it again. I have it at a 0.5 star. Number 15, I have Embryonic, which is a bit of a left turn after some of their classic run. Wayne Coyne cited Miles Davis and John Lennon's Instant Karma as big influences on this record, described the album as having a bit of a freak out vibe, which I think is pretty accurate, actually. I can hear all of that in there. It seems to be some krautrock influence coming in as well. They also said they wanted to do a double album just to be able to like go all over the place, like some of their favorite double albums, like the White Album and Physical Graffiti. But my issue with that is that they don't go enough places. Everything on this is either like moody and ambient or chaotic and repetitive. There's so few melodies to latch on to. It's like all the worst, most pretentious bands of the late 60s got too high together and tried to make a record in a single night, and it's a mess. Not very good. I have that at 1.5 stars. And my number 14 is Zyrika, which is kind of a weird experimental thing. Maybe it's a real record, maybe it's not. It was kind of made simultaneously with the Soft Bulletin. They used the same budget to make both records. And the idea is to have 4 separate CDs on 4 different synchronized sound systems playing at the same time. And I think it was kind of like their way of working through Ronald Jones leaving the band and kind of figuring out what to do next. Obviously, I was only able to listen to a pre-synced version. So I think you lose some of it not hearing it the originally intended way, but even still, I mean, I can really only see it as like a interesting experiment, and I think in spots it's even successful, but I don't know. I think it probably even really greatly contributed to their upcoming success and like the great albums they did after it. I think it was a big stepping stone for them. Very interesting, very cool. The end result for me, not very good musically. So 2.5 stars for Zyrika.
That's tough to hear. My number 16 is actually Telepathic Surgery. But the interesting thing about that is that I still have it at 3.5 stars. So this might be the best showing of any band I've ever had with this many albums on TLM. There's some pretty cool experimentation here going against like that underground college rock feel of the first 2 albums, but still very much in the same vein genre wise. Just starting to let things get a bit weirder and crazier at times. I love the bass on Right Now, not as much as Michael Anthony's bass on Van Halen's Right Now, but what can you do? The drums are going wild on this. Everything is just cut loose a bit more on here, and not quite unraveling into what it's supposed to be, which is fine. To me, it's like a transitional album for them, a bit of a trying some things out kind of album, kind of record where Wayne's mind takes over a little bit too much and tries to break away from the obvious influences to the lips so far. And that's kind of what I love about the first two records, is just like really obvious influences, and they're really young and giving the passion toward it. But like you still get Chrome Plated Suicide, which is really cool and big and anthemic. And I love the Zeppelin inspired anti-track, Hare Krishna Stomp Wagon. He name drops Michael Stipe and UFO Story as some really cool tuneful piano on it. Some really cool riffing and harmonica and Redneck School of Technology, which is awesome. I really love the variety of the first two, and I feel like this one has even more variety, but somehow I like it less. Number 15, I've got Ochsi Mladi. Not really sure how you say that, but I'm still at 3.5. I think it's really good. Right off the bat, you get some more modern dream pop kind of production. Sounds like The Weeknd could have produced it, even maybe. It's full of really good synth work and low-key poppy R&B vibes, kind of borrowing a lot from like Washed Out and kind of chill wave stuff. How is actually a really cool song. I love the lyrics on it. I'm not one of those Rush fans, but to me, this is like their Signals album when they went heavy on the synthesizer too much and should not have. But the album does sound really good, and I think it's one of those albums I'd like more if I didn't know it was the Flaming Lips, because it's not what I want from them. It's very rhythmic, very stylish. I like the more bassy stuff that doesn't rely so much on the synthscape, like Do Glowy. And I mean, it's still really good to me. The Castle is very splendid and mesmerizing. Just feel like this album doesn't flush out all of the creativity, which is what you want with Flaming Lips. Number 14, I've got Zyreka. I'm still at 3.5. I can really see the Radiohead, like mid-90s Portishead kind of trip hop, kind of Britpop kind of mashup thing. Really, in the first time I've revisited this in so long, I still find it pretty groovy and a very even kind of jazzy record. Lots of Pink Floyd coming through here, I think. I love some moments of this album. I think it's got some amazing scope. It's very picturesque, but I think it has some great tunefulness, some great catchy parts, but not as much. I do really love that bubble synth and Riding to Work in the year 2025. I like all the synth work in general. It just doesn't live up to the rest of their stuff. So those are my bottom three. But very good albums. I'm the Flaming Lips guy here, no doubt, obviously.
Listen, you're beyond help. I think like we might have to cancel the whole shebang if you're already at 3.5 stars. Before I begin, I'd just like to say, usually, when we do these discographies I'm not familiar with, and maybe I'm hesitant to do, I usually find myself, kind of getting into them, at least a grudging respect for the artist. And we didn't have that this time at all. So I'm very, very happy that I get to be here for all this. At the bottom for me, I got Ochsi Mladi. I listen to them backwards. I not like backwards on the CDs, but from most recent to last. I don't know if that helped or hurt me, but after getting past American Head, I had no idea how bad some of these albums were in the late 2010s. And this one there was just absolutely nothing I liked about this album. I just thought it was so, I know they're pretentious, but like it just felt even more pretentious than usual, and just unlistenable for the most part. So 1 star for that one. It's one of my least favorite albums we've ever listened to. 15, jumping back to 90 for In a Priest-Driven Ambulance, which was definitely my least favorite of their initial run. I don't mind his Paul Westerberg-ness in the beginning, and now he's kind of getting away from that. Like you can kind of see him transforming into that higher pitched, like slacker Neil Young kind of thing that he does. And this one, you had like that sort of garage rock punky attitude, I think, on the early records. And this one's definitely getting into like the alternative, less melodic. There's got to be some like Sonic Youth influence on this one. And a lot of like droniness, a lot of off-key singing, unconsciously screaming. Damn is Shine on Sweet Jesus annoying. Like that is one of my least favorite tracks in the whole discography. Raining Babies is awful. Take Meta Mars is even worse. And I just don't do slacker rock, and this is way too in that vein. So God Walks Among Us, I think, is a 0. I wrote that. So and there's just nothing here. I hate the lyrics. I don't like his singing. I don't like Wayne at all. And this is like even getting away from the little bit of respect that I had for him in the beginning.
Did you say your star rating for the Priest-Driven Ambulance?
1.5, I believe. Let me make sure. It's another one that just did absolutely nothing for me. I hated it. I hated it so much. And then The Terror would be my number 14. 1.5. Yeah, still at 1.5 for The Terror. And just another one where I don't find anything that they're doing interesting or pleasurable or just anything. And the Terror hits right after, they kind of get into a groove a little bit in the late 90s, early 2000s, spoiler alert, where they're not so hard to take, but like around the margins, that early stuff, that later stuff is just some of my least favorite types of music all coming together. So yeah, 1.5 for The Terror. So 3 just heinously bad albums at the bottom for me.
My number 13 is Oxy Melody. Some people in our Discord, and apparently also Joe, hate this album as much as I hate The Terror, but I think this is light years better than The Terror. I think after 2 really long albums with like no songs, we finally have some tunes again. It's far from my favorite Flaming Lips stuff, but I think it's fairly listenable at least. The songs have arcs to them. Things build and swell and fade away. And I don't know, things like How and Sunrise, Eyes of the Young, and We a Family, I think are not bad songs. 2.5 for Oxy Melody. Not amazing, but compared to what we had just gone through, a welcome return. Number 12 for me is the sophomore album, Oh My God, It's the Flaming Lips. Still a 3-piece at this point, still self-produced, still pretty rough. Not entirely different from the debut, but I think there's a little bit more of like a psychedelic edge to it coming in, where the first one was more just kind of like straight garagey, especially on the 9-minute track, 1 millionth of a millisecond on a Sunday morning. Coyne and Ivins allegedly experimented a lot with sleep deprivation during the making of this record. I don't know if that kind of played into the trippier aspects of the sound. I think the highlights on this record are a big step forward in writing, like Everything's Exploding, which also has some great guitar work from Wayne. Can't Stop the Spring is a cool riffy tune. Love Your Brain, I think, is a nice tuneful ballad. But I think there's also a fair bit of failed experimentation here too that kind of weighs down the overall listening experience a bit. I think they're on the road somewhere here, but just not quite there yet. 2.5 stars for that. And then my number 11 is the debut. Here it is. Again, just a 3-piece here. Far from their best. I think it's definitely inessential, but I think it's pretty cool for what it is. A little punky, little garagey, pretty straightforward rock and roll. Even still, though, I think there's some glimpses of future Flaming Lips on this one, like in the acoustic guitar solo on Trains, Brains, and Rain. A little bit of sweetness coming in on the album opener, With You. And I think even just in the song title, like Jesus Shooting Heroin, you can kind of get a sense of their personality. And I don't know, as heavy and as straight ahead as it is at times, I think it stands out by never really feeling aggressive. Like it doesn't feel like other punky bands of the time. It feels like a celebration of rock and roll more than anything, which I don't think a lot of bands around this time really had that sort of feeling in their music. So, which is something I love about all of their best work. It's celebratory. So not bad. 3 stars for Here It Is.
That's a pretty good idea about their early stuff, about being celebratory compared to the other punky stuff. But my number 13, I've got King's Mouth. I'm still at 3.5. I think it's very good. I haven't spent too much time with it. I listened to it when it came out in 2019, and now I've listened to it a little bit again because of this week. And yeah, it's kind of a return to form for them, and album construction, kind of a throwback in style and sound to their glory days of like that really good pop, poppy neo psychedelia. I think it kind of lacks the big anthemic charm that they used to have, and even some more of the radio friendliness of their best work around the turn of the century. But it's still trippy and playful. The Sparrow is pretty good. Giant baby sounds like old school Flaming Lips. But maybe it's because these also just kind of make you remember of better stuff by the Flaming Lips. It's hard to really get hooked into it. So I still think it's very good. Number 12, I've got Transmissions from the Satellite Heart, which is probably going to throw people through a loop. I used to like it a lot more than I do now. I don't know what it was for me in this deep dive, and I loved this deep dive. This is cat out of the bag. Top 5 listography we've ever done. I'm in love with this band right now. 3.5 for this album. I think Coyne's presence is kind of fully formed here, and you can maybe call it like album 1 or 1A for like their major works, but it's got great drum sounds. Turned it on, great little power pop vibe, good quirky little indie pop rock. They formed a more mainstream sound here compared to the albums before it, but not necessarily entirely mainstream, which they never are, or artistically mainstream. But they're far removed from like REM and Replacements and college rock alternative kind of stuff. But to me, they're just not quite in their sweet spot yet on this album. I do still think it's very good. I would laud it a lot more if it wasn't number 12 on this quick little chunk of the video. Chewing the Apple of Your Eye is really sweet and endearing. Superhumans is cool. But I don't think the guitars are where they need to be for the band. I think they're actually better when they don't have major guitar influence. And lyrically, it's really quite charming and cute on this album. But, they're better at doing those cute and charming things and tying them into a grander scheme. So still just 3.5 here. Yeah. And then number 11, The Terror. I don't know why you guys hate The Terror so much. It's awesome. It's all encompassing. I've spent a decent amount of time with it. It's bolder and more collected than the wild downward spiral of Embryonic. There's some more ambient stuff on it, more experimentation, trippy cosmic feel. Your Lust is really cool. It is a very saturating kind of album. Like it's almost like a movie score kind of album where there's just a lot of, scope and scape and all of that. But I really love just some of the moments that they've created. They really like the dystopian kind of cyberpunk kind of landscape on You Are Alone, very haunting. To me, compared to their other stuff, The Terror is just a bit too one note, which is something that never really is a problem with their stuff. It's still very good. My favorite on the album is probably Butterfly, How Long It Takes to Die. I think it's really good. 3.5, The Terror. They're an excellent band.
I had to cleanse my ears by listening to something a little less overdone, like Muse, after this discography ended. My number 13 is going to be Zyreka. I thought about giving it a 0 for the hassle and the pretentiousness, but I mean, it wasn't one of their albums for the label, so it's not like it's just kind of a little like spin-off that they decided to do on their own. And it's not awful, but I mean, listening to it on YouTube, I just don't think was ever intended for that. So I'm gonna give it a 2 for the effort. It's an interesting concept, at least, but it's just not something worth listening to unless you're one of like the 6 people on Earth with 4 record players. Number 12, I'm gonna go with King's Mouth, which I think you both thought I'd like more, or at least Ramser did. Maybe Jason. Jason was right on. I do hate narration in my albums. Who's the narrator? Mick Jones. from The Clash, which like you're gonna get Mick Jones and that's what you're gonna have them do. Like that just sucks. Come on. Yeah, this period, I just do not like Wayne Coyne's vocals at all. And most of it's just, kind of electronic mumbo jumbo, save for some decent guitar on All for the Life of the City, which is really the only track that I noticed and wrote down any notes on. It's weird. I get like throughout their discography, they crib a lot from bands that I love, like Yes and Zeppelin and, Pink Floyd and stuff like that. And you can hear their influences throughout the music, but it's always like taking the worst parts. And it's just like this one kind of reminds me of Yes, but if they were just like noodling the entire time and had zero songs. So I got the classic rock vibes, but I just didn't like what they were doing with them. And my number 11 is going to be Telepathic Surgery. This one, they're moving away from the Replacements. It's hard for me to really tell their influences. I don't really like this era of alternative that much. Like I feel like there's some Husker Du in there and some Sonic Youth and stuff like that, and whatever else. I don't know, Dinosaur Jr. I've no idea. Just those bands, those alternative bands, loud. This one, you can kind of tell Coyne's trying to get a little more serious and like make a profound statement and profound music. But to me, it just comes off as like them becoming their pretentious selves that they would truly embrace in a couple albums, in a couple years. And Hell's Angels Cracker Factory is like the alt version of Amagama. Not the last time I'll mention that album. UFO Story. It's just like this inaudible screeching, lurching guitar, just like all over it. And then they break into this lovely piano part at the end, which is the best part of the entire album. And I do enjoy the redneck punk of Redneck School of Technology and the kind of poppy Last Drop of Morning Dew. So, it's not terrible. Like, I like when they're a little more raucous and energetic, a la Replacements. So, I'm going up to 2.5 stars for Telepathic Surgery. King's Mouth still at 2. I don't know if I mentioned that, but we were out of the 2 territory into at least albums where there's some interesting, decent songs that I didn't hate.
All right. Into our top 10s now. My number 10 is Telepathic Surgery. Better mix, I think, than Oh My God. I think with every album, they're kind of like creeping closer and closer to their classic sound. And I was trying to think of like another band that developed more gradually yet steadily. Like they just very slowly evolved into what they became. Chrome-Plated Suicide, I think, is very clearly based on Sweet Child of Mine, which I think is pretty funny that they would so closely replicate a Guns N' Roses song. And I think overall the sound is starting to feel more cohesive and like they have a real vision and an identity, where before they kind of were just like an amalgamation of influences, and it's starting to take some shape here. Also a shout out to Wayne and his guitar playing, which I think is pretty overlooked. I don't think he does as much guitar playing these days, but pretty solid on those early records. I don't think this is a remarkable album by any means, but another important step along the way for them, kind of becoming more of their own thing rather than just like this garage band kind of teenagers bashing it out, and kind of actually turning into something, and the songs are getting better and it sounds better and more well produced. So 3 stars for Telepathic Surgery.
Very cool. Good shout out to the gradual incline towards getting to your sound. Maybe Rush, a band that the 3 of us love, kind of got there eventually around album 7 or 8 or so.
Good point.
My number 10 is In a Priest-Driven Ambulance. I'm still at 3.5. Really good albums here. Religious themes everywhere. I hate the backing vocals on the opener, Shine On Sweet Jesus. I think it ruins the song. with Joe. And that's like the only occasion where they're too flaming, their lips are too flaming for me on this song. It's just too much. But I think Wayne is taking major steps on this album to finding his own voice, and I think he's a very underrated singer. I don't think in the history of our almost 3.5 years on the channel now, we've mentioned Wayne Coyne as like a great singer from in, and I think he's very underappreciated. Unconsciously Screaming is really cool, more acid rock guitar on it. And this like little period here post the major influence of like college alternative stuff and Replacements and Husker Du and pop punk and all, or post punk, excuse me. Like this is a cool little period for them because they're really finding their footing. I think Raining Babies, Wayne's really becoming Wayne with this like infant like crooning. I think the drums sound great. I think the drums on Flaming Lips records are incredibly underheralded. I adore the way he sings Five Stop, Mother Superior, Rain. I love the youthfulness and the rawness of these early records. And I think like there's a couple of songs on each records which are still among some of their best stuff. I think they mature into becoming an amazing album span, but man, when they were younger and a little bit more passionate and less in their head, they turned out some great songs. Uh, Not crazy about Stand in Line coming right after it, but In God Walks Among Us is one of my favorite tracks. Not crazy about the vocal effects on him there. I think it's their style. I think There You Are almost reminds me of Moonlight Mile a little bit. And that brings me to a major point. I have always loved the Flaming Lips. I've listened to most of their albums. I think only 3 of these albums are brand new to me. Doing this deep dive, like their influences are just everywhere. Like it's a constellation in the sky at night. It's crazy how many different bands you hear them kind of filtering into their sound. It's so cool, especially when you go along chronologically. And I think it's all over this album. I think it's very good. I think Mountainside is heavy and cool. I love the stormy breakdown in the middle. They're not quite finding where they want to be with their sound or where they're with their writing, but I mean, the instrumentation's there. Everything's getting pretty damn close. And that's my last 3.5. 9 great albums coming up for the Flaming Lips.
It's tough to take. My number 10, their major label debut, Hit to Death in the Future Head. Basically, they hit the nadir with Priest Driven Ambulance. I thought that was a low point for just like any type of melodic, pleasurable type of pop, rock, whatever, alternative. So now they begin their journey to cloying indie preciousness, and it just right off the bat, you get it here. Coyne's voice is getting higher. It's like getting a little higher and wavier-y. Kind of like Perry Farrell-ish at this point. And the pop sensibilities are coming out a little bit more, so I do appreciate that. Feels more melodic. Maybe it's the major label thing. It's not as noisy, it's not as drony and ugly as Priest of an Ambulance. And they're sort of, you can kind of sense that they're like locked on and looking for that like next sound. And kind of going that way. But I just don't think it's that successful. And I don't know, like naming songs talking about the Smiling Death Porn Immortality Blues and Ginger Ale Afternoon, the Astrology of a Saturday. I really hate that. Like it's so lame. And everything about this band just sort of annoys me in that way. And they're really like latching onto that cloying preciousness, that cutesiness that we think we're so clever, or whatever reason they went this way. And I don't like it. I really don't like it. And Wayne Coyne just annoys the hell out of me. And this album happens to have 29 minutes and 16 seconds of just absolute bullshit, just whatever it is at the end, the untitled hidden track, which I am counting, and which renders the whole thing almost unlistenable. So 2.5 stars, but I don't know. I guess I skipped over all the parts that I thought were decent because my notes just are not reflecting the fact that I must have liked something. I don't know. it's annoying the hell out of me, though, looking back and looking at these track listings and the titles and everything.
My number 9, this is where I go up to 3.5 for King's Mouth. The first one in some time without Fridman producing. It was conceived as a soundtrack project for a Wayne Coyne art exhibit. And as mentioned before, there's a bunch of narration on this record done by Mick Jones, which does not bother me at all. I think it kind of adds to this kind of storybook feel that the record has, and I kind of enjoy it. But finally, kind of like getting close to the sound of their best classic albums again. Not nearly at the same level, but it's at least that sound again, which I appreciate because I did not like where they went after that at all. Overall, I think the writing isn't as good, but there are still some standouts like Sparrow, I think is good. All for the Life of the City is cool. I dig that little guitar riff in that tune. It also has that kind of like oompa beat, just kind of getting back to that more whimsical feel that they used to have at times, not so gloomy like on The Terror. I think to some degree this is just them kind of like repeating the past again, but after seeing the alternative, please do just repeat that over and over. 3.5 stars for King's Mouth.
Okay, my number 9. And I'm up to 4 stars. I think their early albums are great. I got Oh My God, The Flaming Lips, really rocking drums to kick off the record. And there should be no surprise that I love these first 2 records because they're basically replacements records, and pretty darn good ones. I kind of bought more into the point of view that Jason has that who cares if it's copying something a little bit? You find copying stuff everywhere. Yes, this is barely a Flaming Lips record as we know it, but it's a record and it's by the Flaming Lips, and I think it's great. You get 1 billionth of a millisecond on a Sunday morning, very 70s kind of sounding guitar, incorporating more 70s straight ups punk rock and some progginess added to it. And you get that bar rat hillbilly kind of feel, Pink Floyd influence at times, which will come into play later down the road, obviously, in their career. Maximum Dream is really cool, even kind of proggy metal. And I didn't really know how to describe what I was feeling listening to these 2 records, but I think Jason hit it on the head. It is kind of like that bar rock punk, cow punk kind of feel, but not angry or mean. It is more celebratory. They are having fun with rock and roll just in this genre. It's very cool. Well said, Jason. And Can't Exist is a beautiful piece. So you get a little bit of where their future stuff will stem from. Prescription Love is really cool. I like the volume moves and Sealing is Bending. I think that's really cool. It's very amateurish, but it tells the story, and that's kind of what they're all about. This album sounds considerably better than the debut. I think evident by the first track very much. Can't Stop the Spring is a really good fun rocker. Love Your Brain is a gorgeous way to end it, and starting to see that singing style of Wayne kind of creep in a little bit. I think it's great. Oh my God, 4 stars.
I'm pretty surprised that you like the early Flaming Lips stuff. I've never heard you mention them, so I just assumed. I don't know. Who knows? My number 9, I got Embryonic, 2.5 stars. There's some cool sounds here. I noticed that Aquarius Sabotage reuses or steals or whatever the drum part from Time, which is cool. And you have those little moments throughout their discography, I think I mentioned before, where I can clearly hear the inspiration that they borrowed from. And it's usually a good inspiration. It's usually Zeppelin or Pink Floyd or Yes or somebody cool. So I don't mind the sound here. There's not as much Wayne Coyne's vocals, which is good, but it's a double album, and there's a lot of noodling, a lot of soundscapes, a lot of kind of just stretched out pieces that I don't know, probably shouldn't have been stretched out so thin, because they're just nothing new or fresh or exciting or interesting. For the most, I mean, there's some cool stuff happening, but they always have to go too far and just like ruin it for me. Like if you condense this into a single disc, I think there'd be enough cool stuff. 3.5 stars probably, but I don't know. At this point, it's like you really have to be on a lot of drugs to think this album is just like a masterpiece, or like I don't know, like everything. I mean, everything about Coyne just screams like you better be baked listening to this, because otherwise it just annoys the shit out of you. I don't see how you can take this music sober. I'll say that. I was very sober listening to this discography this week, past couple weeks.
I'll tell you, I was sober for all of Billy Joel, and that didn't help. So,
all right, number 8 for me. I've got In a Priest-Driven Ambulance. I'm surprised Joe hates this one as much as he seems to. I think it's pretty cool, and I think it's a step up over the first 3. I've got it at 3.5 stars. They add a second guitarist here, Jonathan Donahue. They also bring in a new drummer, Nathan Roberts. But probably the even more notable credit here is the addition of engineer and producer Dave Fridman, who's one of my favorite producers ever. I love almost all of his work, and he's a huge part of the Flaming Lips story going forward from this point. I love the opener, Shine On Sweet Jesus. Those low, weird harmonies, I mean, they're stupid. That's the point. They're funny. And I think on a song called Shine On Sweet Jesus, it's just hilarious. It's just great. And Wayne, starting to get up into the higher register and not sounding as rough as he did on the early records. I prefer his higher vocals. Unconsciously Screaming, I think, is great. I feel like it's kind of like a knockoff of Why Can't I Touch It by the Buzzcocks. The rhythm and the melody are very similar, but not in a bad way. I think it's great. And I think you find that a lot, like looking at their Wikipedia pages for these albums, especially, you see like a lot of songs referenced as like directly tributing like another song. And when you read that and listen back, you're like, oh yeah, obviously. I didn't actually read that about that song though. That's my interpretation, but I would not be surprised if that was a direct influence. 5-stop Mother's Superior Rain, I think, is really cool. It's got those big open chords. I think one of their first like really successful cracks at a more anthemic sound. But I do think this record starts to run out of steam a little bit in the second half. Not quite as interesting, side 2. But overall, a nice step forward. I think a bigger leap than between the first few records. I think there's a pretty big jump between Telepathic Surgery and this, and I would attribute that probably mostly to Dave Fridman. I think it's a cool sounding record, and I think the highs here are like some of their first really great songs. So I dig this one a good bit. 3.5 stars for In a Priest-Driven Ambulance.
You thought I was fucking around as a Flaming Lips fan before. Get ready for this. My number 8 is Here It Is, and I'm already up to 4.5 stars. I think this debut is freaking phenomenal. They could have just coursed out this route and been more punk oriented their whole career, and maybe even never lived up to the 4.5 and 4-star rating I give to their first 2 albums. But like, this is a friggin' damn near masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I love With You. I think it's one of the greatest album ones of all time. This is all about the 80s alternative rock, college rock kind of thing. It's cramcore. I keep reading on the Discord about blockcore. This is cramcore stuff. It's right up my alley. It's a picture painted just for me. I love it. I love the construction of how it seems to have an early crescendo and then revert back. Like, what a cool first song to do, where you feel like it's the last song in the album and over in 1 minute, and it just takes you on a ride you're not ready for. It's so cool. I think it shows how odd they can be in a weird way, kind of set them up exactly who they need to be and who they become. There's lots of passion on this album. It's great lo-fi alternative rock, very replacements, like with Unplugged and Trains and Brains, some punk and rockabilly influences, a little bit of like Midwest cowpunk. I like the heavier craziness of Jesus shooting heroin. I love the bass and groove, kind of kinkish on just like before. She is Death is awesome. It's very lonesome and hazy. It's kind of like got these early shoegaze vibes. I think the drums come in perfectly with the chord changes, kind of like their Jesus and Mary Chain song on this album. They have so many influences that they just bury their head into with these first few albums. They're just like, we like this stuff, this stuff, this stuff. This song is our version of this. This song is our version of this. And I love that. That's a great way to grow as a band. Um, then you get like the cooler, moodier, kind of frantic Charlie Manson blues, which neither of you mentioned, which is awesome. The backing vocals are so cool and menacing, very fun and creative twisted tune. Man from Pakistan is cool and catchy. Maybe their most replacements like tune, but that bass tone is dope. I'm not going to go off the deep end and say anyone at their instruments is among like my top 50, but the fact that they're never talked about is pretty sad. They're fantastic, especially in the rhythm section. And they've had a bunch of different lineups, so I understand that. But the work is always really good. So you get just this big 80s collage of alternative rock and punk and post punk and college rock and dance rock mixed into one. It's ultra cramcore and it's 4.5 for me. Sorry. Unapologetic.
What did you give the last, or what did you give Let It Be, Tim, and Pleased to Meet Me?
4 or 5. Well, Let It Be and Tim got 5s. I think Pleased to Meet Me got 4 or 5, but this is like this. It's the same. Like
Yes.
if this album was not the Flaming Lips, it was just one band that did one album around the time of the Replacements and then died in a drunken car wreck. This album would be lauded as like this. Well, yeah, they had the Replacements and you had all this, but you also had this one album. Like it's a case of
Man,
history and stigma versus the quality of the album. This is a great album. It's amazing.
it's very, very interesting. I've never heard anyone talk about that album ever, but yeah, that's fine. It just blows my mind that it would be a 4.5. I'm at 2.5 for my number 8. Transmissions from the Satellite Heart. And on the plus side, the production's better. I keep liking the production more and more, it seems, as the albums go through the 90s and the band improves. I don't think any of them are good. They're okay players. They're not great until Stephen Drozd, or whatever the hell his name is, comes along on drums. I think he is quite clearly the standout member on his instrument. And he provides some lively little punches to transmissions for sure. And I do notice like the acoustic guitar coming in more. There's more of that like mix that you'll hear on the classic albums. Soft Bulletin, especially like that. There's a very like when I think of the Flaming Lips, I think of that like underbelly, underbacking, whatever acoustic guitar kind of underneath everything, driving it along. And you definitely start to hear that here. I think Wayne's completely left behind his Paul Westerberg-iness, his college rockiness. And he's getting into the higher registers even more. And, a song like Turn It On, I think is pretty darn good. Has some nice big old riffs. But I can't stand the lead vocals on this. And I don't like the backing vocals either. It's like they found a backing vocal even more annoying and irksome than the lead vocal, which is impressive. Just the vocals throughout this catalog just absolutely kill me. Like it murders any chance that I have of like really getting into anything. Pilot Cannon, The Queer of God, which these song titles, it's like Fall Out Boy, but more pretentious and annoying. Everything has to be like some joke or like some little like not funny or clever. Like they're not even plays on words. They're just total bullshit words put together. It doesn't make any sense. None of it makes sense to me. And it does have She Don't Use Jelly though, which is a pretty good song. I do like that one. I like the Ben Folds 5 cover a lot. I just, mostly things when I was listening to this article, just things I hate. So I don't even like my star ratings. I'm not even sure if they're correct because I don't have much like favorable feelings for any of these. But I got up to 2.5 stars. I don't necessarily remember why. So I must have liked something on here somewhere. But I don't know. Some of these notes, man, it's just like abysmal, butchering the vocals, annoying, bad, hate lead singer's voice, annoying. So I don't know. Something about this one I like more than some of the other stuff. So 2.5 stars. Transmissions from a Satellite Heart.
Jason, we're halfway through. What do you think about Wayne as a vocalist?
I like him. I think I don't think he is a great singer, like technically, but I like what he brings to the band. I like his presence. This might already be the most time you've ever spent at sub 3 in a discography. I don't know. I can't think of anything else.
I mean, as a whole, I don't think I definitely respect Sonic Youth more than the Flaming Lips, but I would rather listen to the Flaming Lips than Sonic Youth.
It's okay. We're doing Blonde Redhead soon.
No, we're not.
It's going to be 1 and 2 land for Joe.
All right, my number 7 is Hit to Death on the Future Head, the major label debut, recorded by the same lineup that did In a Priest-Driven Ambulance. Although Donahue and Roberts left right after the recording and before it was released. This to me is like the beginning of the fully formed Flaming Lips, a band with its own unique sound and identity, completely put together. This is it. And I think, obviously they continue to grow and evolve from this point on, but I think starting with this record, everything after it feels like the same band. And I like this record a lot of good songs. The Sun is really cool, kind of psychedelic. Frogs is really great. Hit Me Like You Did the First Time is great. Ginger Ale Afternoon. And even though it's not as conceptual as Priest-Driven Ambulance, the whole thing has like this like wonderful psychedelic pop weirdness to it, very cohesive in sound and tone. It's pretty dense though, and the vocals aren't very loud, a little bit buried in the mix. But I think because of that, you get like these like lovely melodies kind of creeping out, peeking out from behind the clouds is kind of how I think of it. You just get like these little glimpses of catchy tunefulness coming out throughout all the noise and stuff. So yeah, this one's pretty cool. I like it. Another step forward. Now they got the budget. So 3.5 stars.
Well, we're at number 7 and I am at 4.5. I think the aggregate of my Flaming Lips score, given 16 albums, might be the best performance any band has ever had on the channel for me. And it makes me kind of think where they fall for me all time. They got to be top 30. Like, I friggin' love these guys. Embryonic is my number 7. I've got it at 4.5. And I will say this one has an asterisk by it because I have gone back and forth on this album so much since I first heard it. I was visiting my buddy up in Schenectady, New York. We listened to it. We drove around listening to it. We were big Flaming Lips friends in college. And I remember just being like, it's okay. And then I went home and listened to it more and I thought it was awesome. And then I remember listening to it again and thought it was bad. I've had this as low as 2.5. And now I think it's a damn near masterpiece. It is so hard for me. And by, a year from now, I might be like, it's good. It's 3 stars. But right now I've got a 4.5. I think it's awesome. It's a double album. And I find it fascinating and full of twists and turns and just a great piece of like the Lips collection. Really fascinating to me why they went into this darker mode, more expansive place. And really one of my favorite things about the Flaming Lips is even if like you hate them, like Joe, you don't really get the same album twice. Maybe a little bit here and there. Like they jump around a lot. Joe's like, it's the same damn album quality, but the style is so different. Like coming from a Replacements band, 25 years before this, coming to this, and still finding a way to get like that post punk kind of vibes in here, like mixed with their experimental psychedelic virtue. So cool. I adore Convinced of the Hex. I think it's a great opener. The difference between us, there's such a stark warning in the way he says that, a version of himself that we've never really seen on any or heard on any other album. Gives me some really cool kind of Talking Heads vibes. The whole album has a down the rabbit hole kind of bite to it. So cool, more venom than anything else. This one is not celebratory at all, so they can do it all. Things really bleed into one a lot more here. There's lots of experimental moments, lots of jamming, but Wayne still finds a way to put in these touches of memorable vocal work and melodies. I love his work on Sparrow, Looks Up at the Machine. Evil is very sad, very well done. I love the urgent playing and chaos of Aquarius Sabotage. Reminds me of their versions a little bit of Yes, and Yes is like great prog stuff of the 70s, very Chris Squire like on bass. I think it has this great balance of having these chaotic jam sessions and then these kind of like sluggish, saturated, just like, soak in moments. I really like Powerless. I think Warm Mountain and that bass distortion, very cool. The epic laser beam synth flying in. I love the Outer Space Lounge cachet of the Impulse. Watching the Planets, super badass, almost like Big House drums. Just this toxic kind of quality to it, very sinister. But then it has like these illuminating keys. So I think it's this 70-minute long epic where it's supposed to be drug out because it's supposed to be a trip. Like there's no doubt, like Joe's like, how can you enjoy these sober? They're not pretending that you probably should be. They are a drug induced, drug stylized band. If you've seen any of their album artwork, posters, or anything, it's like, hey, we're the new 60s acid trip band. Let's do it. So that's what it's supposed to be. I think it's very cool. I think the playing on it is fantastic. I disagree with everything Joe has said, except, he complimented Drozd at drums. I'm not sure if I say his name, but he's a fantastic drummer, just sensational drummer. And it's all over this album. I've got it at number 7 right now. It could change, but I love it. I think it's borderline amazing. And it's like their big kind of like, they love Pink Floyd, and it's like their wannabe like giant prog rock effort. But it falls short of being like a 5-star classic album because, one, the instrumentation, the playing is just never going to be as good as King Crimson or Yes or Pink Floyd or Tall or any of that. And they don't back that up with like, Dark Side of the Moon has 5 friggin' songs on the radio all the time. Like it has neither of those, so it's not quite as good, but it's a fantastic experience. I love it.
This is hitting me hard. I just don't remember you ever talking about this band ever in my entire life, other than American Head winning. Like I guess, did you have Soft Bulletin and Yoshimi? Maybe I just blanked out during those times, but I don't remember you ever mentioning Embryonic or any of these things.
Soft Bulletin was my number 2 in '99, but I don't remember. Either way, I had a really cool Flaming Lips poster up in my room for like 10 years. I don't know what happened to it, but it was awesome.
I remember both him and Brian defending Embryonic when I hated it when it first came out. So there's history.
Fair enough. Fair enough. My number 7 is Oh My God, it's the Flaming Lips, or Oh My God, the Flaming Lips. They made this album on sleep deprivation. Mike Patton gave us Angel Dust on sleep deprivation, and these guys give us Oh My God. Not quite in the same level. We're still going for the Replacements aping. Everything's exploding right off the bat, just like Replacements in your face, wannabe, that kind of hillbilly punk, I guess is what people call it. And I don't, it's weird. It's kind of like the Replacements, where like I hate it, but also kind of like it at the same time. Like there's so much just like noise and Sturm und Drang. of Maximum Dream for Evel Knievel. And it's just like horrific to me. And like it's all this like shitty noise surrounding these pretty decent riffs. And it's like they can't get out of their own way and just like make a normal good album. Like the Replacements, they got out of their own way and made like 3, 2.5, whatever you want to call it, like really good albums. And we're still like noisy and obnoxious. And like I just don't get that from them. It like to me, this kind of sucks. And like you get that a little bit of that like compelling like energy. Like it's not precious, like it's not cloying and indie. And I feel like they're not trying that hard. And that's sort of like to their benefit because I don't love their like try hard later phase in because they're like trying too hard. Here it's just like, they're just gonna make some music and it's just gonna hit you in the brain and you're never gonna remember any of it, but it's kind of enjoyable while it's happening. And I'm up to 3 stars. I kind of like these early albums, definitely more than I thought they would. I had no idea that they were even in this like universe ever. This kind of like punky, alternative, whatever, garage, hillbilly, punk, whatever. So I did kind of enjoy how they started out, and it was kind of went downhill. So we'll see if they can recover. Like right now, we got some like crap at the end, some crap sort of in the '90s, promising start. Like where's it going to go in the other area? So I don't know. It was a real roller coaster of a discography, these guys.
All right. Well, we've heard a lot about how Graham's the Flaming Lips guy, but I'm no slouch, and I don't have any 4 stars. I'm going up to 4.5 directly from my 3.5s for Transmissions from the Satellite Heart. This is the first one with Ronald Jones and with Stephen Drozd. It has She Don't Use Jelly on it, which was their first charting single after appearing on Beavis and Butthead long after the album was already out. Kind of a fluke hit. Keith Cleversley is listed as the producer. And I don't know what happened to Fridman, if he's still around in some capacity or not. But I think Cleversley's being the producer, I think, is notable. I think this record is a little more streamlined and rock-oriented than some of Fridman's more experimental tendencies. Some great guitar tones here. I love the guitar on Pilot Can at the Queer of God. It's really heavy and awesome sounding. Awesome drum sounds, too. I think it's really, really good sounding record for this era. Similar to Futurehead in some ways, but I don't think you have to work so hard to hear the melody. The melody's way up front now. It's not tucked behind all the guitars and noise and stuff. Everything sounds great on its own. And then when you put it together, even better. And I think on this record, they kind of put together all of these ideas that they've kind of been toying with on previous records. And it all gels. It all comes together. It feels at times like this amazing, like 90s alternative 2-guitar attack. But the drum production is so weird. And like there's all these DIY elements happening. But it still sounds great. It's not really lo-fi and it's vaguely psychedelic. And there's all these really interesting melodic ideas, but it's also like poppy at the same time. I can hear some like Pavement influence, I think. So I don't know. It's a lot. It's kind of pulling from a lot of different places and making it its own thing. And I think it's really cool. And I think they're very successful at doing that. And it almost feels like a record that could only exist in 93. It's very quintessentially 1993 in the best way, I think. Made my top 5 that year. Was maybe a surprise pick during our Albums of the Year series coming from me, but I think it's a great album. 4.5 stars. Transmissions from the Satellite Heart.
Yeah, I don't know what it is with that album. I thought about it in 93 too, and like I used to really love it, and virtually every other album in their catalog has gained more applause for me. And that one, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. But it is nice to be joined at 4.5, which is where I'm at, they have 6 really great records and probably some 5 stars coming up. I've got Clouds Taste Metallic at number 6, 4.5 from 1995. I think they are mastering right now the crazy, colorful acid atmosphere that they're known for, really fine tuning it. It's an album full of like, I think they do this style, you could say, from here through At War with the Mystics, and really just kind of changed the song structure and the approach to songwriting. But I think from now 95 to about 2006, 2007, this is like their sound, and it's kind of their bread and butter. But this one is really cool because it's just packed full of tightly knit little wound psychedelic pop tunes, which I think might be up maybe at Jason's number 1, because it almost plays like a really good 60s psych pop album. It's almost like their Beatles album. I adore Abandoned Hospital ship. The way the piano waddles around and those notes kind of repeat and accent everything, really good. I think the Flaming Lips, among their best albums, their 4.5 and up albums, are some of the best studio production work you'll hear post the 1970s. I think it's fantastic. But they still at the same time kind of keep their rocking roots. That really just genius way to get everything that they were all about and their influences into their new kind of ideas. Jason was talking about how they kind of move very gradually into their sound, and it's so gradual because like they never really want to give anything up, and it makes everything better because it's just such a slow boil into a really good stew. Psychiatric Explorations is great. The 2-hole killer bass work on it, really sly, super catchy chorus. I think Wayne is one of the best chorus writers of all time, and I think he's one of the best lead singers of my generation next to Tom York. I think he writes great melodies. Placebo Head Wound is awesome. I love the kind of march in it. The bass on this here Giraffe is great. Their songs are so cool because the feeling and the mood aren't always exactly what they seem. There's a lot of like conflicting and fleeting emotions coming in and out that get in the way of the songs. Brainville is fantastic. Weird, dreamy country carnival feel to it. When You Smile is terrific. I love the upbeat drum work. Just this quirky, cartoony brilliance to everything, like Kim's Watermelon Guns. It's twisted and kind of creepy at times, but also innocent. It's just like a little bit of everything, and I love that. You got Evil Will Prevail at the end, like this Boy Scout anthem of a song. Not a bad track on it. 4.5 for Clouds Taste Metallic, number 6. Pretty high up already.
High as a damn kite. My number 6 gonna be Here. It is the debut. Nothing wrong with this one. You got With You, some nice folky alternative pop. You get like some infusions of dissonance and noise, but nothing, outrageous, nothing to ruin the song for me. Unplugged, you got that high energy replacement style. Same with Trains, Brains, and Rain. A ton of Paul Westerberg and Wayne's voice here. And that, I gotta say, when I first heard this album, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, this is not the Wayne Coyne I hate. This is not my least favorite singer of the past 30 years. This guy sounds pretty decent. Sounds just like Paul Westerberg, who has a great voice. So that was not a negative for me here. I thought Jesus Shooting Heroin's fine, a little long, 7 minutes, unnecessary. But interesting song. Charlie Manson Blues is terrible though. It's just like overly done, overly theatrical, and sort of a try too hard kind of way. Not something that they're good at yet and shouldn't even try. In general, this, I don't know if it just surprised me so much that I'm up to 3 stars, and a high 3-star at that. Or if I really liked it, but it's noisy and it's raucous and it's wild, and I think the playing is decent, the singing is fine, the songwriting is pretty okay. It is a replacement level replacements album, so 3 stars for Here It Is.
All right. Not my number one. My number 5 at 4.5 stars is Clouds Taste Metallic. So with the previous record, they had this kind of like fluke hit with She Don't Use Jelly. So this was like their big moment. They make this amazing record. It's supposed to be like the record that really puts them on the map, and it totally flops. But now it's kind of a cult classic, and I think it's just great. A really great record. Everything you could have wanted it to be after Transmissions. It's so tuneful, so catchy and engaging. But I don't think it sounds like anyone else at the time. I think Wayne had really found his voice by this point, both tonally and as a writer. I think the stuff he's writing about and singing about is really unique and different from any other lyricist I can think of. And sonically, there's just so much fun stuff to listen to on this record. You got that like super fuzzed out, like totally shredded speaker sound on Psychiatric Explorations of the Fetus with Needles. I think that is such a rad sound, and to make it so musical at the same time is impressive, because it's really just such a jacked up guitar sound. It sounds what would normally be like a horrible sound. They make great use of it. Brainville, I think, is super interesting. More super fuzzy guitar tones on there, but you also have some twangy leads kind of countering those. And it's got this kind of like going to the circus on acid kind of feel to it, which is really cool. The drum sounds are massive on this record. They completely drive the song on When You Smile, and the bass on that tune is huge as well. I don't know how everything can be so big sounding at once, but they manage it somehow. Super creative, interesting, well made. I think looking at my top 5 from 95, it could crack into the top 5 upon a redo. 95 is one of my favorite years of the 90s, so there's competition, but it could get there. Super solid record, really good. 4.5 stars, Clouds Taste Metallic.
As much as this video has been disproportionate among the three of us with enthusiasm, I was ready to go from the get-go. Jason took a while to catch up with me. Joe's still very far behind. It looks like we're all going to share 4 of the top 5. So we're kind of lining up with general consensus with very different level of enthusiasm. Maybe. My number 5, and I predict this is Joe's number 2, At War with the Mystics. I've got it at 4.5. And so I grew up with this album in college, and I loved it the second I heard it. And I know a lot of people that are like diehard Flaming Lips fans, and you look at like lists of their best albums ranked. This album doesn't really stack up in the top 5, but I think it's awesome, man. I really do. I think it's kind of their big pop album. And I love this album because unlike Soft Bulletin and Yoshimi leading up to it, this seems like an upgrade of their old soul, where their old soul was kind of taking their influences and doubling down on it track for track. And very diverse. The album isn't as uniformed as Bulletin or Yoshimi, but it does give you this big bolt of electricity. It's all just like really cheerful and a lot of like sing-along, clap-along kind of songs. You get the corny but brilliant Layman sing-along with Yeah, Yeah, Yeah song, which I think is brilliant. Like, I think it's kind of dumb, but I think it's brilliant in that kind of way. Like, I think it's incredibly catchy. The way it does the call and response, like ask a question, answer, yeah, 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 yeah. Like, I think it's clever. I think Free Radical is really cool, sly and cool and fresh, almost like a Prince song. That guitar lead on Vein of Stars, so freaking cool. Everything is so tuneful. They're very underrated part writers, at least in this era. Like, there are so many things that just get stuck in my head. And the guitars are really turned up here compared to the albums past, leading up to this, but don't really serve it in a conventional way. But there's certainly like some sick guitar moments. The Wizard turns on is almost straight up Pink Floyd to me. I think it's really cool. I think the bass is great on this album. It Overtakes Me is really nice. It's very cheerful and vibrant. This is a very celebratory album, like Jason was talking about. This whole album is like pom-poms and fireworks. Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mr. Ambulance Driver, I've heard so many different opinions on this. I think it's a very good song. I don't think it's a great song. I really like the beat behind it, kind of that low-key steady beat that kind of like Belle and Sebastian does. The siren going through the whole thing, it doesn't really bother me. I can see why it bothers some people, so I'm kind of indifferent about that. Haven't Got a Clue is cool and fun and a bit crooked. I think The Wand is the underappreciated gem on this album. I think it's awesome. It just missed my top 10. I love the way the vocals come in with the "You've got the power" in there. Like, it's so cool. The opening guitar riff, like, it's awesome and so big. A big, I think in this era when they're more anthemic, they're even better. And I really dig the more straightforward kind of pop style with the fuzzed out guitar in their own way. I'm also very happy that they kind of only did this for this album and didn't just be like, this is our sound for moving on. Like like they were big after Bulletin, they were big after Yoshimi, and then they did this, which sounded like their big pop explosion. They could have just doubled down on this, like they were Kings of Leon or something, but they were like, no, we're going to do Embryonic next. So I love them for that. And I think this is a great little piece of their catalog. 4.5 stars. Very underrated album for At the War with the Mystics.
Okay, number 5. What are we gonna go with here? I'm gonna go with Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, 2002, follow up to Soft Bulletin, and probably the apex of my hatred for Wayne Coyne. He kills it for me because I hate his vocals. I hate his entire ethos on this album, especially. He's just so cutesy and annoying, and like everything has to be overdone and all. I mean, as much as I like the production and I think it sounds really good and the mixing is quite excellent, there's just so much crap. Just like, it's like a garbage truck, just like dumping like different instruments and sound effects. They're just so overdone. Like, it's weird that I'm the only one who feels this way because you guys are always complaining about this kind of stuff, especially Cramser. And yet, the most overdone artist that we have done by far is the Flaming Lips. Like, no one even comes close. It's just like the mountain of overproduction.
Well, we did do ABBA and Muse.
They're not even close, man. It's not even in the same universe. Like, the amount of extraneous instrumentation, you don't get that on Muse or ABBA. Like, they're big and climactic, but you don't have like 6,000 different sound effects and like tape loops and whatever else just kind of like gumming up each of these songs. And it's hard to tell if the songs themselves are good underneath all this stuff. Like, I think there's some decent melodies. Fight Test, which, although he ripped off Cat Stevens and was paying royalties to him, so that might be why it's so catchy. I mean, there's some decent stuff on here. Do you realize I don't like very much, mostly because of his vocals and sort of the, like, I don't know, pie-eyed, like, oh, do you realize, like, it's so magical, and just the kind of preciousness, cloyingness really irks me. But it's a catchy song. I just hate Wayne Coyne's kind of approach to it and his singing of it. And you know, the whole like Yoshimi thing, like, it's a decent concept, but it's over by the 4th song. Like, it never mentions again. It plays no part in the rest of the album after the very annoying Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots Part 2, which is all sound effects and like hi-yas and like little just like garbage. I hate it. I hate that song. But I do like, I mean, it's such, for me, this album dropped the most of the ones that I knew. Like, I thought I liked it, but for every like good song, there's an equally annoying bad song that's overdone or precious or just ruined by Wayne for me. So it was tough to balance it out. So I eventually went with 3 stars because just I hate Wayne Coyne. It's as simple as that. It's what it always comes down to. Everything about his approach to music bothers me. So 3 stars for Yoshimi. Not impressed.
My number 4 is American Head. David Friedman's back producing after not producing King's Mouth. And on that record, without him, they were dabbling kind of in a return to their classic sound. And here they are just like fully in back to the classic sound. I think they bring a real strong concept to the table this time as well, a better concept than they did with King's Mouth. I think the songs are really strong. The production and the arrangements, I think, are the best they've been since At War with the Mystics. And maybe more than any of their other albums, this one has like a really like cinematic feel to it and this real sense of like American nostalgia to it, which I think is really cool. And I was reading a little bit about it, and apparently like there was this idea about Tom Petty when he was in Mudcrutch before forming the Heartbreakers, traveling to Tulsa to record. And the idea was like during that time, Wayne's brother was so messed up on drugs, and the idea was like, what if they met when they were in Tulsa and the band only made this like one little record that like disappeared and no one knew about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and they just got into bad trouble with Wayne's brother. Let's make that record, that like lost Petty record. So I think it's kind of cool. He's talking about his family, he's talking about his brother, and talking about America and how we use drugs. And I don't know, it's all kind of wrapped up in this cool package. I think the emotionality here is the strongest that it's felt since the Soft Bulletin. Mother, Please Don't Be Sad, I think is a really cool track. And at the time, I had heard the record. I listened to it back when it came out. But when we did our albums of the year in 2020, I was pretty skeptical of Cram's 5 stars. And I'm not quite there, but I can see it. And I'm at 4.5 on American Head. I think it's a really good record. Great return to form after quite a bit of floundering.
Thank you, sir. I have talked to a few people that it didn't get a lot of it got good reviews when it came out, but I feel like even 3 years later now, it is kind of more well received than it was when it came out in 2020. Number 4, I've got Hit to Death in the Future Head at 5 stars. I had never heard this album before this. It fell in between Transmissions and Ambulance Driver, and for me, it kind of just got lost in the shuffle. And I have in bold written here, this is my Joe moment, which Joe does every few months, where he's like, I didn't know this, and I love it, and now it's in my top 3 or might be my favorite of the year. This is in my top 3 for 92 and might compete for the winner. Well, it's not gonna beat Harvest Moon for a million, but I friggin' love this album. It has spent the most time with me since I was listening to it. I think it's friggin' brilliant. I love it. It's like their weird transitional period out of being college rock, alternative kind of stuff, and into what they would become. And I just think it's friggin' gorgeous, man. I feel like this is like a step toward lo-fi pop with a lot of acidic colors and imagery. You know, I read somewhere a lot of people call this garage pop or smoked out garage pop. But man, like it opens with just straightforward rock or talking about the smiling like death porn and immortality blues. Very cool. I think you get an early sense of one of those like classic sing-along Wayne choruses, like with this defines their golden era. Hit Me Like You Did the First Time is amazing. Has some really cool, almost like British ornate, like pop of the 60s. Like I think this album has like some Brit pop 90s moments and some things that Brit pop in the 90s were alluding to in the 60s, doing it all right now. It's so freaking cool. Mixed with some obvious, really good drum work, just creates this awesome wall of sound. I think there's a lot of beauty in the arrangements and really just great like marriage of their styles and sound you can really call their own, mixed with Wayne's confidence that he's finding right now as a singer and his unique voice. I think The Sun is badass. Just missed my top 10 songs list. And I think the rhythm section in their, bread and butter albums is really underrated. And I think this is one of the albums where, it's a different lineup, but it really starts to show that they need to pay attention to it because it's so good. I love the haziness of the harmonies. I love the Britpop like horns coming in all triumphantly at times. It's a little bit shoegazy, a little bit like Brian Jonestown Massacre kind of on the album. There's a certain devilishness to it at times. The mix of Wayne's melodies and the band's psychedelic dreamscape is never more evident and felt good to burn. I love it. Feels like you're floating inside of like a smokestack rainbow. And just like the songs and the album feel are so effortless. It's so ornate and beautiful to me. It's like a free prose, kind of just long form poetry. Ginger Ale Afternoon is sun kissed and pretty and uplifting, and also gives you a good jolt for the album. Like they don't lose all of the rock sense. It's just a fully realized effort. I'm blown away by this. This is my Joe moment where it's like an album. I'm like, how did I miss this? It's so freaking good. I love it. It's ultimate cramcore, frogs, and hold your head toward the end are great. And you get that noise loop song at the end, but you can skip that, Joe. Like it's fine. But man, I freaking love this album. I've only listened to it 3 times in my life, and it all happened in the last 9 or 11 days or whatever. And I can't wait to listen to it again. 5 stars.
Well, it's nice that you had a moment. I don't know if I'd give 5 stars out to an album I've only listened to 3 times. That's a lot. That's pretty. That's a big step for you. My number 4 is going to be American Head. It is nowhere close to 4.5 or 5 stars. It's just absolute lunacy. You guys, though, give out 5 stars like, I don't know, Wayne Coyne gives out stupid titles to his songs, which is copious, especially for the 2020 stuff, which I don't quite understand. But I think this is a decent album. 3.5 stars.
It's my only 5 star album of 2020.
Is it?
One. Yeah. Yours was Rita Samayara, the
Not
teenage girl that was doing corn impressions.
not 5 stars.
So go on.
Not 5 stars. And critics loved it a lot more than American Head. So this is a fine album. It's very reminiscent to me of Dark Side of the Moon. Just sort of like the vibe of it. It has a very Pink Floyd-y kind of aura about it, with a lot more swearing. A lot of swearing in this one, which is kind of weird. A lot of drug use, a lot of dead on LSD, selling weed, just like weird kind of, I don't know. The lyrics on this one are weird. Great drums throughout, good rhythm section, good bass playing. Wayne's voice is like real upfront, and maybe for the first time, I don't have anything negative to say about it. At least for the first time since the early records, because he's up in the high range, but it doesn't feel like, this is not like a cute album. Like this feels like heavier to me and a little more substantial, and not like, there's nothing like the Spider Bite song, something like that, where it's just like, my God, like just tone it down for 2 seconds. Like this feels, maybe Jason said like cinematic, and I think that kind of helps steer the album away from that cutesy indie rock stuff into just, I don't know, weight. Like it feels weighty to me, and maybe it's because of this story and sort of his drugged out brother, and it's a little more real and substantial. And I think that definitely helps steer it in a better direction for me anyway. Maybe people don't like that. Maybe they want the cutesy stuff, but for me, I'll take this heavier direction, and everything else sounds. I mean, it sounds good, and it's not annoying, and I think that's a very good step for for the band. And it's not too noodly, and it doesn't have Mick Jones doing spoken word part. Like there's none of that. Like just sort of annoying and like There's no pretentious like, okay, we have to have this like extra layer to make it seem big and important. Like I feel like the music and the lyrics sort of organically give it that weight instead of having, something else outside of the music try to like impart that weight to the music and the album. So I think it's a very good step in the right direction for the band, but I'm not going to go like 4 stars or anything. So I do like it though more than I did in 2020. I only had it 3 stars back then, so it's definitely risen a fair amount for me.
All right. My number 3, going to 5 stars. I don't hand out 5 stars like candy. I've rated like close to 6,000 albums and I only have like 255 stars.
Honestly, from what I've looked at with the stats, we're actually pretty all kind of friggin' even around the 5-star like distribution ratio. So we can't really rag on each other with it.
So yeah, Soft Bulletin's my number 3, 5 stars. I take a little bit of issue with you singling out Spider Bite as somehow insubstantial. It's a great song. It's an emotional song. He's singing about how he's worried about his friend, and Stephen Drozd got an infection from using drugs and needles and lied to everybody and said he had a spider bite. I think it's a nice song. Very emotional. If you had a spider bite, I'd write a song about it. All right, so so on this record,
I was working on my basement when the spider showed up.
Anyway, they're using Stephen Drozd here as more of a multi-instrumentalist in place of the departed Ronald Jones, who had left the band. And they're using all these layers of detuned MIDI tracks to kind of try to replicate the sound of a real orchestra. So it kind of does. It sounds more real than your typical like MIDI or like keyboard synth patches or whatever. But it doesn't sound fully real. It's kind of like this weird in between, and it kind of creates this sort of like almost hallucinatory type of feeling where you're like not sure what's real and what isn't. And also on this record, they avoided using guitar as much as possible. There's very little guitar on the entire thing. I think they broke the rules a couple times. There's a little acoustic guitar here and there, but for the most part, guitarless. I think Coyne's lyrics are more thoughtful on this record, especially. And they really take center stage, I think, in the mix, like just way up front. I think really for the first time, at least the most they've ever been up front. And I think the lyrics are really meaningful here, and there's a real emphasis on highlighting them on this record. He's talking a lot about his dad's illness and death and near-death experiences of band members like that spider bite, and like Michael Ivins' car crash prior to recording the record. He and his wife were in a really bad accident. And there's lots of interesting sounds on this record, a lot of really successful experimentation. I love the drums being sped up, like using that jog wheel during Spider Bite song. And the super like low synth bass on Spoonful Weighs a Ton, I think is super cool sounding. And the intro drum beat kind of beatbox thing on Feeling Yourself Disintegrate, I think is really cool and different, really like dry, up close, mouthy sound, the brap bap baps. Just really cool, unique. And I think everything that they do, like you can talk about how cool it is and like the interesting sounds and like, oh, that sounds cool. But I think everything that they do contributes to the feeling that they're trying to express on the record, which I think is what really sets it apart and makes it like 5-star territory. And it's hard to even say what that feeling is, but I think when you hear it, you understand it. I think it's a great piece of art, a great record, lots of great songs. 5 stars for the Soft Bulletin. Number 3.
My number 3 is American Head, my 2020 Album of the Year winner. That stands as we speak. I've only grown to like this record even more. I love the American mythology thematics. I almost automatically love an album when it does that. Sorry. I just love that shtick. I think the production on this is great. but so friggin' different than everything else. Like it's still a Flaming Lips record. You're still gonna get like those cosmic weird influences, but for them, this album is very grounded and very rich in its simplicity. Like there are some songs that are like bass, light guitar, piano, vocals, and drums with a little bit of sound effects. And it's very well done. Has a bit of a 70s vibe. The last lithography we did was Elton John. I would say this is kind of their Captain Fantastic in its approach, where it's just kind of like no frills, no thrills, but like an expansive, really honest, well written story from beginning to end. Every song is really fucking good. I don't know if there's a great song on it, but 12 really fucking good songs makes an amazing album. Maybe they're most simple musically, maybe they're most grounded, very relevant, kind of a piece of literature for them and like folk kind of album for them. The lyrics are everything here, but you still get those like Starman Bowie kind of vibes, cosmic nature, weird and imaginative, big epic sprawl of an album. This album almost reminds me of like a grown-up version of The Suburbs by Arcade Fire in the way it kind of like attacks the suburbs in Americana. But like it's this epic made-up tale about growing up in America with drug use and confusion and pain and trouble. And at the end you get My Religion Is You, and it brings it all together and helps you kind of find meaning or at least peace in it all. And the album's very much a slow boil, not nearly as bombastic as stuff previous. Dinosaurs in the Mountains, very childlike, so you get that kind of throwback, very kind of nursery rhyme kind of scenery. You get really lush and beautiful moments with piano. There's way more piano on this album than any other. Like all of the albums combined up to here with piano don't live up to what they do on piano here. So I thought it would be Joe's favorite, but like number 4, I could see it. I could see them building off of this into an album Joe actually likes, maybe because he said like Wayne is less Wayne than ever here. Like this is kind of their straight up just like classic rock album in a lot of weird ways. It almost sounds like Father John Misty was like, here's the kind of album you got to do, and they were like, okay, like let's do it. But yeah, Mother I've Taken LSD is really cool. The songs are straightforward. Like every other album kind of takes unexpected turns in the tracks. This, not so much. But you still get that rainbow of emotions of the basics, just like jubilation, confusion, adventure. Like you really get that in You and Me Selling Weed. Beautiful track. It's really easily comprehensive and accessible. And at the same time, maybe their best piece of just straight writing an album. It lacks a little bit of the fanfare that makes them their style, that makes them awesome. So it's only number 3, but man, it is a masterpiece. American Ed for me. Number 3, 5 stars.
All right. My number 3 is going to be another one where I mostly have negative things to say about it because I didn't write that many positive notes. Clouds Taste Metallic, 3.5. I think this is my number 3, mostly for one song, which we'll get to. And I think there's a very solid foundation here. I think it's a little bit wrecked by the production. It's overly busy. You got annoying sound effects everywhere. Really hate his lyrics, Wayne's lyrics, like hippie, druggy, like, oh, look at the universe. It's so big and it's expanding. And like Placebo Head Wound, just come on. Like I hate that kind of stuff. It's an awful hippie on weed pondering about the universe. And no, it doesn't work for me.
That's not true. You
What?
don't hate that stuff if there's like twin layered guitar riffs turned up to 11 happening under it. Then it's fine.
I mean, then it's decent. Then it's decent. You have to be really good to like get me over like that kind of stuff. And I mean, I think despite the lyrics, I think that's a pretty good song because it sounds very good. Like the mixing is great. I love the way the acoustic guitar sounds. It's so bright. And then they, pile on the stupid sound effects and overproduction. But like underneath, like you can definitely see that they're somewhat talented at writing songs. Um, and if some other negative notes, Abandoned Hospital Ship is up there for the worst songs I've ever heard. Um, Psychiatric Explorations of the Fetus, terrible title, but I really like the fuzzy bass part. That's good. This here Giraffe though sucks. It's music for like 5-year-olds. Really hate Coyne's vocals on that one. Brainville is like if Working Man's Dead sucked. That's pretty funny. And there's some cool 70s guitar parts, solid bass, great drums on Guy Who Got a Headache. So again, cool stuff. Excess production on top of it though. When You Smile, great drum sound. And I guess the only reason I really like this album would be for Lightning Strikes the Postman, which totally rules. Just by the end of the first measure, just crushed my anti-Flaming Lips defenses completely. That like rising bass just bludgeoning the hell out of the song sounds unbelievable, bruising and muscular, and it kind of disguises Coyne's vocals in just like the storm of guitar, bass, and drums, and it rules. That song totally kicks ass. And probably why I have it at number 3 and at 3.5 stars. I mean, some of these albums, I don't really like any of these albums so far, but there are some cool songs on them. But I just don't feel like I would ever come back to listening to an entire, like I will 100% skip The Abandoned Hospital Ship and This Here Giraffe the next time I listen to this. Like there's just no possible way I'm getting through an entire listen of Clouds Taste Metallic. Despite some cool stuff in there, I just can't do it. So 3.5 stars, I guess, for Clouds Taste Metallica.
All right. Well, Trifecta's already off the table. So my number 2 is Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, number 2, 5 stars. Kind of in the same wheelhouse as Soft Bulletin, but a little more glitchy and electronic than Soft Bulletin. And not as emotionally thematic, but I think song for song, it goes toe to toe for me. I think it's really great melodically. The arrangements and production on this record are so cool. Do You Realize, one of my favorite songs ever, basically boils the entirety of the Soft Bulletin down into one amazing song. Some of the electronics and soundscapes on this record are so gorgeous and transportive. Tracks like One More Robot and In the Morning of the Magicians. I just love some of the synths and stuff going on those tracks. When the guitar solo turns into a trumpet solo on Approaching Pavonis Mons by Balloon, that is just such an incredible wave for the record to roll out on. It sounds so good. So yeah, I like a lot going on this record. I think sonically just holds together really well. Soft Bulletin, maybe a bigger statement, probably is, but I just like the songs and the production here even more. It's really, really good. 5 stars.
So big change for me here. One of the biggest flips ever for me. I am going with Yoshimi at number 2. It was my number 1 looking at Flaming Lips week, but I've sort of got 5 stars. Piggybacking off of everything Jason said, sonically, it is just awesome. Sonically, it feels and unravels like this little like graphic novel with the story behind it and all of that. And like the story doesn't disappear after Yoshimi Part 2. Just the name dropping of Yoshimi does. Like it's still the same story. Fight Test is great. The melody on that is just fantastic. Everything on here is so big and catchy and weird, and his melodies are just so good. But this colorful acid rainbow, like sweetheart pop surrounding it all, just this cool robotic apocalyptic feel, but like this innocent childlike nature. Great story behind it. One More Robot, Jason's right, awesome. Great drums, great bass, much jazzier and like oddlier, moodier aspects at times. I think this album's very inspired by a lot of stuff coming out of England at the time and Europe. Like you get some Air kind of feel from like Moon Safari, my favorite album of '98. It's got a heavier and bolder and louder sound and production than Soft Bulletin. It feels like they're gearing up for like anime war right now. It's very cool. Of course, the title track is one of the all-time great sing-alongs for sure. Part two of Yoshimi, I think, is great. It's like this action scene kind of jam along. The drums are awesome, and the bass is just so in your face. It works so well. Then it goes into Morning of Magicians. I love the drum beat there against that simple little synth part. So cool, such a groove. Perfect for like a little space flight montage. Totally love it. Lets me escape. Just missed my top 10. I love how it kind of disintegrates and sweeps you into this state of like pre-uteral warmth. Ego Tripping at the Gates of Hell rules. Album is just full of these big anthemic poppy little rhythm section jams. That's what I love about it. I love the falsetto he hits here. I think he's great. I think he's like bombastic. I think it's kind of like his Freddie Mercury album where he's like loud and profound. Are You a Hypnotist? Great drums driving everything. Everything feels like a forward journey. You get that great tweaky 70s like bendy synth or guitar part just hanging there. The mix on that track is great in his vocals, a lot of mystique. And then toward the end, you get it Summertime and Do You Realize is one of the all-time great songs of our generation. Like, it's totally beautiful. It can be played simultaneously at a wedding or a funeral, which is saying something for a song. It's amazing. It wraps life up in a nutshell perfectly with a bow. But my number one is one I didn't think coming. Let's hear about Joe's number two.
Wait, isn't your number one the most obvious number one of all? Like everyone.
It is, but I
Everyone.
like when I talked about it before in the channel, I don't get why everyone loves it. Now it is like clicked for me in the biggest way ever.
Jesus Christ. My number two is gonna be the Soft Bulletin. Robert Christgau's Dud of the Month, back when it came out, gave it a B. It wasn't that bad, but he called them ridiculous and mocked the overdone drums. So, 1 out of 2 ain't bad because they are ridiculous. And the drums do kind of remind me of that. You ever seen the video? The drummer is at the wrong gig. Like he's doing like the crash all around, like just in sync. That's kind of what this album reminds me of in places. I'd like it though. Like I think that's cool. But it does sort of feel like, is he like at the wrong album recording or something? Because Drozd is just going nuts. So now this one's tough because I really do love Race for the Prize. I think that Mellotron and that whatever they're doing with it, a little glitchy, that slide or little effect that they do on the Mellotron sounds amazing. I think it's a great song. I love the drum sound. I love the way it's counterpointing that sort of hazy psychedelia and sort of the cutesiness. But you get like that big, full, like Led Zeppelin, straight out of friggin' In Through the Outdoor, just like completely ripped from the the pages of In Through the Outdoor, the sound and some of the drumming, and that's fine. I like steal from the best. And it sort of cancels out Wayne's annoyingness. And I know, I mean, maybe this is about like, all the near death and things that happened to his friends and co-band members, but the way he sings and writes lyrics, it doesn't matter. Like he finds the most annoying way to write about serious subjects. Because I hate the Spider Bite song. Just totally takes me out of the album, which starts great with Race to the Prize, A Spoonful Weighs a Ton, and The Spark That Bled. I think are all awesome, excellent songs. You get so many of the classic 70s sounds. The Mellotron and Race to the Prize, that slidey guitar, the drum sounds in A Spoonful Weighs a Ton. Like just straight out of my favorite 70s rock bands, and that's great. I love the orchestration created by the MIDI stuff on The Spark That Bled. Like it really mimics someone we just talked about, Paul Buckmaster, Elton John's work. especially on like Madman Across the Water. Extremely dense and layered and overlayered. And there's a great riff underneath, and it's got some cool twangy guitar, mandolin, banjo, bass, whatever it is. Fool in the Rain vibes for sure. And I do like the way this song kind of jumps around a lot. Like you get those hints and then it kind of like dissipates, and you get more hints. Like you get like a little yes in there, and then that dissipates, and it's cool. Like I like that. Production is very busy, but I think it works, and I like that they tried something new and toned down the guitar and tried to introduce all these different instruments to make the music. Spider Bite song, like I said, I hate it. Love the drums though. And I don't know, everything after I think is decent to good, but for me, nothing comes close to those first three songs. I don't love Waiting for Superman that much. Suddenly everything has changed. It's kind of that annoying Wayne Coyne style I do not like at all. The lyrics and vocals just torpedo it for me. And I mean, is Race for the Prize Part 2 and Waiting for Superman, the remix, even on the album? Like, are they there? I didn't quite get that, having them repeat. Like they're on the album, on the CD, so I'm gonna count them. So that takes it down a tick. So it takes it down from a 4-star to 3.5 for me. So it's right on the cusp. I wanted to go 4 stars, but I'm glad I didn't after hearing your guys' reviews.
Well, I haven't reviewed it yet.
You're gonna go down. You're gonna go 4 stars for this one. Going back down.
All right, my number 1, as you've already probably figured out, it is At War with the Mystics, which I think is the most criminally overlooked album in their catalog. It's just so good. I don't know why people don't think of it more highly. It's doing all the things that Soft Bulletin and Yoshimi were doing right, and bringing more guitar back into the fold. The songwriting's awesome. I think it's really good songs throughout the entire record. Cliff Skurlock comes in on the drums, which I think frees up Stephen Drozd to do even more other type of stuff instrumentally. For me, it's just like the perfect middle ground between that early era, the Ronald Jones era, and then the post-Ronald Jones stuff. It touches on a little of everything that they've done before, and it pulls it all together in this unified sound. You've got like fun, kind of silly tunes paired with politically motivated lyrics that push right up against like sparse, moody tunes. Maybe a little all over the place. It does a lot of different stuff, but it doesn't feel all over the place. It feels very connected. There's elements of jazz and psychedelia running through it. My Cosmic Autumn Rebellion, I think, is one of the high water marks of their entire discography. I think that track is incredible. Pompeii am Gotterdung, however it's pronounced, shows them at their most Pink Floydian. And then it closes with the perfect little pop ballad and Going On. I just think it's tremendous. It sounds great. The songs are good. It gives you the guitar that you want. That's kind of absent on the previous records, even though those records are 5 stars as well, masterpieces. But I don't know, something about this one has that little extra. I think my guess as to why it was not as well received as the previous 2 records is because it opens with Yeah, Yeah, Yeah song, which I think is a little goofy and light for some people, which makes the record feel a little less serious. It doesn't feel like as big of an artistic statement. It feels like them just doing pop. I think if that closes the record, I think it's a great closer. And I think this record probably rises in most people's eyes. Regardless, it's 5 stars. But yeah, great album.
That's a pretty interesting idea, having it close. I don't mind it as an opener because I think it's a kind of brilliant song, but I can also understand its a lack of immediate appeal. Not surprised both of you going with That War with the Mystics for your number ones. The big pop guys here with some guitar turned up, set in stone. Will Joe gets a 4 for it though. My number 1 is the Soft Bulletin. which I'd always fought against. I always, up until like 2 weeks ago, literally from 2005 until 2 weeks ago, I was like, no, Yoshimi's the better record. Now I get it. Now, in the context of Flaming Lips, I get it. This album is a masterpiece, and it's 5 stars. It's gone up from 4.5 to 5, which means it's my new favorite album of 1999, because Summer Teeth I only had at 4.5. So it's the only 5 stars. I love The Race for the Prize. Even listening to it, knowing Joe would hate the Flaming Lips, I was like, I think he might like this song a little bit, because yeah, that like Mellotron kind of digital synth sound is so cool. It sounds like this like drug-induced game show host intro. Like, it's just so cool and so unique. It's very, very poppy. The drums are really pumping on this album. I love the lyrics, and the melodies are fantastic. And the album has this really cool, weird, like existential commentary on humanity and Earth, and has this like greater meaning and philosophy to it all. That's all really lovely, but not to be taken too incredibly seriously, too. That's what I love about them. They have a lot to say, but they wrap it in this like big bubble gumbo all the time of psychedelia. A Spoonful Weighs a Ton, with that magical piano coming in, and then those drums, like Joe said, are like straight out of like John Bonham territory almost, just so heavy and awesome and turned up for sure. These parts are just like etched in my head as being as some of like my most favorite musically just little segments of all time. Very cool production and dreamlike digital orchestration and loud sounding rock drums. Every detail perfectly crafted on this album. And they use everything at their disposal: electronic drum beats mixed with violins, maracas, shakers, and cheesiest synth noises on this album that somehow work. It's so cool. I think the Spark Bled has that really cool, groovy instrumental part. Beautiful song. Somehow manages to still really weave in all these heavier feelings and movements, then shift around. Just such a unique pet sounds like artistic vision in the studio. Some of the best studio work of all time on this album. I don't care what anyone says. I think from 1990 on, it's really hard to beat the Flaming Lips in the studio. They know what they're doing. Just the details on this record are fantastic. Held together by Wayne's storytelling with his lyrics and singing. I love Spider Bite song. I don't know how you can't. It destroys you. It could destroy me. Just beautiful sentiment. Those vocal moments with the harmonies on Buggin' are just excellent. I love how enchanting the album is, seductive with these like childlike substances, harps plucking everywhere, takes you into this soft dreamland. What is the Light, man? Just masterful and angelic. Some of Wayne's best vocals here reminds me of John Anderson from Yes. We've done a few Yes Anderson. We've done a few Yes references throughout the episode, and rightfully so. Goes right into Observer. Great melody, breather of a track. Waiting on Superman is awesome. I used to think the second half of this album is what brought it down, but man, I really love it. I love the gash now. And Drozd, like, this is his album, his arrangements, his drum work. Fantastic. 5 stars. Soft Bulletin, number one. Number one for 99 as well.
Well, I'm with Jason, obviously, but I completely disagree with his proposition that the Yeah 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 song is the problem. The problem is the whole album. A, there's too much guitar in it. B, it sounds too good. Like it just by far the only record that I can honestly say I like, and I like it a lot. Like I'm 4.5 stars for this. This is another one of those weird occasions, kind of like with PJ Harvey, and I forget, maybe somebody else, where it's just so much better than everything else that they've done. And I reading the reviews and everything, like I know why like Pitchfork gave it a 6.7, because the guitars rule. Wayne's not nearly as annoying. Like his preciousness is turned way the hell down. And it's just like an old-fashioned rocking record with lots of weird stuff. Like it's not like a normal straight ahead rock record, but it has all those elements in there. It sounds much better to like, my very basic ass ears that kind of like the 70s sound. Like I love the 70s sound. This is what delivers upon it the most. And I totally get why Flaming Lips fans don't like it as much and sort of look down upon it, because it's not really like the other albums. It's better. And I also like the fact that, and maybe this helped with the lyrics and the lack of the Wayne Coyneisms, is the political angle and the fact that it's very much anti-war and written about sort of the Iraq War and anti-George W. Bush. And that helps. Like, that helps draw it back into real territory for me. I don't know, I think the AAS song is great. I love the vocoder backing vocals. It's super poppy. I love the way the big guitar comes in. I think it's a great sing-along song. All the things that you said about those other songs, like, this is where, all the Yoshimi songs that you think are great sing-along songs, this is my sing-along song, the Yeah 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 song, With All Your Power. And that's what I like. I love Free Radicals. You get that 70s funkiness. I don't know. This is the only this and American Head are the only albums where, like, I have to fight against Wayne Coyne's vocals in my mind. Like, I don't mind them here. And I don't know exactly why. I haven't like analyzed his vocal patterns and everything else, but I just don't mind him here. He's not annoying to me. Sound of Failure has some great hooks. There's a ton of spaciness. There's a ton of Pink Floyd on here, but it's also more rocking. My Cosmic Autumn Rebellion's great. The Wizard Turns On is awesome. There's that proggy little flute. Not many Wayne Coyne vocals, so that helps. Pompeii am Gata Damarang. Driving bassline really reminds me of like One of These Days from Pink Floyd. Got those grandiose synth stabs. The lyrics are sort of hard to hear, and it's more about ambience. And again, I don't mind that at all. I don't mind not having to hear Wayne on here as much. The Wand is great. Going On is great. I like Mr. Ambulance Driver. I just like all of these songs. Everything missing and everything that I wasn't getting from the other Flaming Lips albums, I get with At War with the Mystics. And once I heard it, I didn't want to listen to anything else. I just wanted to re-listen to this one a bunch. So the easiest choice I've had to make so far, I think, on this show at number one, At War with the Mystics. Really good album. I can say that now.
Damn, I had that guessed and I backed off. I said that was going to be his number one, and I backed off. Damn.
I did not see a 4.5 coming at all.
I'll take it. I'm happy about it.
Yeah.
I'm happy with everyone's stuff. Joe getting to 4.5, Jason getting to 4.5 is early like me. I love the Flaming Lips. They're top 30, 40. It's hard when you really start to make a list, but judging by this discography ratings wise for me, hard to argue against.
All right. Well, let us know what you think of the Flaming Lips, how you rank the records, and what you think of our lists. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out the video description for links to all sorts of places, mostly our Patreon. Check it out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.